Welcome to the Paper Dice Games podcast. This is episode 4, season 1. My name is James Ferran, and today I'm going to be talking about the Ghost of Lion Castle, an old school D&D module, the top 10 RPG games that I want to run, my projects, and more. Now to start off today, I want to spotlight a very, very interesting print and play game from 1982 called Star Smuggler by B. Dennis Suster. Now, I found this game 5 or 6 years ago, and I was so happy when I found this game. This game seemed like it was designed for exactly what I was looking for in a print and play space game. So in this game, you take the place of a character, and I believe your character's name is Duke Springer, if memory serves. And basically, you have a ship, and the ship is, you're in debt. In buying the ship, it's kind of like a mortgage, like you have these monthly payments you need to pay off. And basically you fly around this essentially pre-generated system, taking on odd jobs and trying to make your monthly payments. And that's the game. It's flying around, experiencing the different planets, the different starports, and basically just, trying to make your monthly payments. Oh, and did I mention that it's solo? The game, just when I read what the game was about and I started reading the rules, the game just spoke to me. It was precisely what I was looking for out of a print and play game, a print and play solo game. And I printed it off. It's free, by the way. You can get the download files you can get the links to the download files on Board Game Geek, and I'll link that in the comments or in the details below or the show notes. And yeah, when I printed it off, I was so excited. The game is it's pretty crunchy, but it is just not streamlined at all. And that was the problem that I ran into, is it's got this very 80s style of learning the rules, where you start at like R1, read it, and then go to R2, read it, and then go to R3 and read that. And those give you like different rules about like what the game is, how to play, what your debt is. And then slowly it starts branching you off into different types of rules, where it might branch you to like U27 or, and I don't remember all of them. I haven't played the game in a long time, but after about 2 hours of the first time I played, I sat down and finally thought I was ready to play. And I remember going to the first starport and going to the reference table, which had its own page code. It was like U27 or something like that. And I remember rolling the dice on the starport to figure out what encounter would occur. And then I remember the result sent me to a different reference table. And that reference table had rules, which I had to then go to 2 other rules references. And one of those, I had to go to even a different reference table to roll on. So I remember starting to play it, having so much fun, and then just getting bogged down in how little the rules were streamlined. And that was my big problem with it, really. Star Smuggler is a great game, and if you have a lot of patience or you're willing to make really great player aids, and there are some great resources on Board Game Geek, this might be a game where you find a lot of enjoyment and out of a lot of hours. For me, it was just too rules heavy. It's not even the crunchiness. It was just not streamlined enough for me to enjoy it. And when you read it, it just screams 80s RPG to you. But it's so cool. It's solo. It's print and play. It does exactly what I want out of a solo game. So I suggest you check out Star Smuggler from 1982 by B. Dennis Suster. Very cool game. Very cool system. Be prepared, though, to slog through some rules and reference things like 5, 6, 7 times throughout the game. If you have persistence and can stick with it, or you have graphic design aspirations or skills, you can probably put together a pretty slick system and be able to play the game without a ton of extra work after the initial work of building these resources. But other than that, you may end up like me and finding that that's just a little too rules heavy. So I wanted to give that shout out to Star Smuggler. I even wrote a review about it on paperdicegames.com, but Board Game Geek has all the stuff you need. So like I said, I'll put the link in the show notes, a link in the description below, so you can check it out if you're interested. This week's season focus is on old school D&D modules. And today's D&D module is the Ghost of Lion Castle. This is module Bsolo. I'm going to hold it up here for the camera. And if you are listening on the audio version, this is a brownish, maybe purple, I think it's brown though, cover with a red bar across the top that says Bsolo. And of course it says The Ghost of Lion Castle by Merle M. Rasmussen. And the image on the cover is interesting. In the background, there's like a giant ghost, which the head sticks up way out over everything. Then there's like a traditional gray stoned castle, and then kind of in the foreground, there's a lion with gemmed eyes, kind of castle-like thing. And in the very front foreground, there's 3 creatures flying. I should know the names of these, but I don't remember. They have noses or beaks kind of like mosquitoes, and they suck blood, but they have almost furry appendages, 4 of them, and then like bat-like wings. Anyways, that's what the cover is. Now, the very cool thing about Ghost of Lion Castle is that this is a solo module for Dungeons and Dragons, for like those early versions, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And this was original, like one of the original solo modules, so it was built specifically for playing without a dungeon master. Now, I'll go over the module briefly. On the inside of each of the covers are all the maps of the castle. There's several levels, so you kind of get through there. The very first few pages here describe how to play Dungeons and Dragons in this particular solo module, and most of these rules focus on things like mapping, things like providing workflows for random encounters or fighting monsters. Basically, they tell you how to play the game when there's not a dungeon master there. So for example, there's a list here of when it's time to heal. So it's got like 4 steps when you want to rest and heal. You go through and take away rations, then you roll 1d6, and if you roll a 1, a wandering monster surprises you, and then if you don't encounter a wandering monster, you add 1 hit point to your character sheet, and then you can study your spellbook during that time too, because this module is actually built specifically for wizards, mages, and other spellcasting classes, illusionists, that type of thing. After you get through the initial rules, it gives you a beginning the adventure rule number 19. It tells you what pages to go to, and you start the adventure there. Most of the rest of the entire book is just a regular dungeon. It gives you where in the castle the particular room is, gives you the information of the room, and then you kind of move on. So I actually haven't read the rest of the module, and I'll tell you why in a second. But at the very back, there is a section for pre-rolled characters. There are 6 different magic users or elves that can cast spells, that type of thing. And you can use those to adventure, or you can create your own. Now, I, first of all, I haven't read my way all the way through this, and the reason why I haven't done that is because I'm in the middle of a campaign running through this module. But your question might be, well, how does a campaign running through a solo module actually work? Here's the story inside the Ghost of Lion Castle. So in the Ghost of Lion Castle, the story starts with you and your character at an inn, and everyone's talking about Sargon's castle. All right, and Sargon's like this old wizard person that apparently hid a bunch of magical treasure in this castle, and everyone's saying that every once in a while a hero goes out to Sargon's castle and tries to find some treasure, but oftentimes they never come back. And so the general patrons of the inn basically end up convincing your character to go to Sargon's castle and try your luck in this, dangerous place full of magic and mystique. The innkeeper, nervous about your well-being, hands you something called a magic journal. And in the magic journal are all of the recorded entries of all previous visitors to the castle. And then, of course, you go off and do your thing. And so that's the story. The way it works mechanically is you roll up a character, you get as far through the castle as you can, and you keep a separate document that's the magic journal. And then when your character dies, that magic journal magically gets transported back to the inn, and then you roll up another character and start from the beginning, and using the knowledge you gained from your initial character's journey, which has been recorded in the magic journal, you can try again. And I found this really, really interesting. It is very similar to roguelike games that you're going to see today. If you don't know what a roguelike game is, it's usually a computer game or an app or something, and basically the difficulty level is ramped up to 11, and your goal is to play, and it's expected that you're going to fail multiple times, but every single time that you fail, you learn something about the game, you learn something, a specific part of like a specific environment. Like a lot of times roguelikes work for platformers, and then you can get a little bit further in the game each time. And I found this so interesting when I first read the Ghost of Lion Castle, that this roguelike, this idea of a roguelike game, which is relatively recent, they captured that idea in essence back in the 1980s when this particular module was created. Let's see if I can find a year here. 1984. Yeah, so literally in 1984, this roguelike idea was at least used for the Ghost of Lion Castle. It would be interesting to do some research and see if there were previous versions of roguelike ideas prior to this. But anyways, that was an interesting connection I made. It's like a roguelike adventure where you take a character, see how far you can get, gain knowledge about the castle, and then they'll die eventually, and then you roll up a new character and continue on. So I am actually in the middle of a campaign for this particular module, which is why I have not read through most of the module itself. And my original goal was to run one character a month and see how far I could get and use the magic journal basically as my guide to see how I could get even further into the castle. Now, this got waylaid because my basement flooded back in February, and most of my D&D stuff basically went into storage, and so I was unable to continue my campaign in here, but I'm planning on picking it back up again because I'm having a lot of fun with it. So I've only been able to run 2 characters, and I had a 3rd character rolled up and ready to go when the flood hit and I was unable to continue. So my first character was Zofira, and Zofira basically made it to the castle itself in the magical note journal, which I have right here. There's some good information about how to get to the castle safely. Zofira died outside the castle in the trap. And I have a little note here that says -8 health. So not too good there. My next character was Morwin. Morwin, using Zofira's knowledge in the magic journal, was able to safely get to the castle. Did encounter some orcs on the way there, or at least one orc. Morwin made it into the castle safely. And the last notes in the magic journal say that Morwin thought they saw a tiger and they were going to go check it out. And that's where Morwin died, is Morwin was unable to fight a tiger. Now, my next character was going to be Kamel, and Kamel is an illusionist gnome, and Kamel has 2 health, but Kamel also has the knowledge of both Morwin and my first character, Zofira, and so probably in a week or 2, I'm going to take another run at it with Kamel and see how far Kamel can get. So, that is the Ghost of Lion Castle, Module Bsolo. 1984 solo module for old school Dungeons and Dragons. If you're interested, I suggest checking it out. When I found mine on eBay, I think my copy was like $20 or $30 when I found it. So as far as I can tell at this point, they're still relatively cheap. So if you're interested, now would probably be the time to go ahead and get it. Now I'm going to move on to project updates for this particular podcast, and I have 2 updates. The first update is for an introductory adventure to RPGs using a D20 system that I have been building over the last year or so. And the goal of it is just to be a fun introduction to RPGs and really focused on players who are interested in playing things like Dungeons and Dragons, but haven't been able to get their feet wet yet. And the idea is that somebody who knows a D20 system like D&D could take this module and not need any other resources and have 4 or 5 other players sit around the table who don't know what they're doing and lead them on this adventure. So that's kind of the idea of it. I have 2 playtests set up in the next 3 weeks with 2 of my gaming groups, and we'll see how it goes. Now, my original timeline for this adventure was to release it around October and November. However, I don't think that's going to happen anymore. I was reviewing some of the things I have added over the last year since my last playtest, and any number of them could send me back into like a redesign phase. And so I think an October or November timeline for release is a little too optimistic. So I'm not convinced that this is going to be published this year, but at some point in the near-ish future, I'm excited to try and get this out the door. We'll see, but regardless, I'm excited to run the playtests and just have fun with my gaming groups in general. The other project update that I have, and this is going to be the giveaway for this week, is I have a new idea for a supplemental product for space games. And I'm just calling it Distress Calls. Likely the ending title will be something like 20 Distress Calls or 1d20 Distress Calls or something like that. And I came to this idea because I was playing a solo traveler campaign the other day, and I've been having a lot of fun with that. And one of my workflows when my crew in the solo traveler campaign comes into a new star system is I have them roll for a random space event, and it depends on the traffic in the space system, but this particular crew ended up getting a random space event, and then I rolled to see what the random space event was going to be, and the result was a distress call. Now, there's a ton of resources out there online about what to do for distress calls. The problem that I have with a lot of the resources out there is that they are specifically open-ended. They will likely give a ship type, a motivation for the ship type, and that's about it. So it might be, a fighter pirate who wants to take your cargo, or it might be some sort of police cruiser who wants to do some sort of checkpoint security, or it might be a merchant who doesn't care about your particular ship, but is, their engines have failed or something like that. And I wanted more out of my distress calls. I wanted something that would maybe give you a little bit more direction than just a one line, of what type of ship it was and a one line problem for this particular distress call. So what I built, or what I guess I am building, is a distress call resource. And basically what it is it's a 1 page per distress call. There'll be 20 in the resource, and it's going to have the Mayday message on top. It's going to give you a little bit of background about what's happening. And then after that, it's going to tell you what is next, what the characters might be able to do to help resolve the situation. And then on the bottom are some possible resolutions based on how the characters do. So I'll give you an example here. I will just read through one of these quickly. This one is titled On the Loose. So the Mayday message reads, Mayday, they've gotten loose. We've got... A loud mooing or braying takes the mic over. I repeat, they've gotten loose, and we're flying blind. So that's the Mayday message. So then what's happening? Dalton Buck, captain of the Bronze Horizon, is in the middle of transporting a significant amount of large, beefy livestock. Somehow the livestock have gotten out of the cargo bay and are now meandering across the entirety of the ship. The livestock are large and prone to startle easily. To keep themselves safe from possible stampede in close quarters, the crew have barricaded themselves in the engine rooms and wired up a way to communicate their Mayday message from there. Because of their location, no one is on the bridge, except possibly some livestock, and the ship is flying blind. So that's what's happening on the ship, and you can imagine that after the crew receive this Mayday message, they can communicate kind of back and forth and identify, there's a bunch of livestock roaming around the ship, and they're relatively dangerous and startle easily. So maybe the crew is able to get on board and try and figure out how to solve this situation. So here's what's next for the crew. If the characters board the ship, there are a few suggested possibilities below. And I should point out that these are generally skill-based possibilities. I'm basing it off of Traveler, so a lot of these skills translate directly to Traveler. However, a lot of these skills you can find similar analogies in other systems. So, animal handling. The livestock are big, beefy, and possibly dangerous, but an experienced animal handler should be able to go room by room, round up the livestock, and secure them back in the cargo bay. Stealth, science, or knowledge. Being able to safely navigate through or around the livestock to the bridge would allow a pilot to steer the ship to the nearest starport for more appropriate help. This may require stealth, understanding of how the livestock live, or even intimate knowledge of the nooks, crannies, and passages of the ship. So you can see 2 different examples of how a crew might solve that particular problem. Now, the crew is not limited, or the characters are not limited to solving the problem that way, but that's 2 directions that a game master might kind of lead the characters in trying to solve this particular problem. There is a mechanic in this one called Stampede. Any failed attempt to go through or round up the livestock results in a Stampede check. So in other words, a failed skill check would result in a Stampede check. To make a Stampede check, roll 2d6, then add 1 for each previous Stampede check rolled. If the number is 10 or greater, a Stampede occurs. A Stampede will kill 1d10% of the livestock in a panicked movement, and any character caught in a Stampede must make a successful athletics or similar check to avoid getting trampled to death. So that kind of increases a tension and danger into it. Of course, failed skill checks result in possible stampede, possible bodily harm to anybody amongst that livestock. Now the resolution is down below, and the resolution reads, Dalton Buck is an honorable man. If the characters can help steer the Bronze Horizon to a nearby starport for further assistance, or if they are able to round up the livestock, he's willing to offer 10% of the profits to the characters, profits from selling the livestock. Of course, profits decrease when livestock are killed in the panic of a stampede, or by more run-and-gun style solutions from the characters. Regardless the outcome, if the characters help Dalton Buck, they will always have a friend among the stars. And so that is a pretty good example of what I'm trying to do with these distress calls. As you can see, it's a little bit more involved than just a table or two tables that identify like an action and a noun or something like that, or a ship type and a motivation, or a ship type and a problem. And rather, it's more narrative. It has a beginning. You identify what's happening on the ship. It's got a middle. You can identify how to solve the problem on the ship. And then it's got a resolution. It kind of outlines what might happen if the characters succeed or if the characters fail. So that's one of the things I'm working on right now. It's going to maybe be released sometime this year. Who knows? I kind of don't schedule these things out all that precisely. But I will say that I have 2 of these distress calls that are already written up, and that's going to be my giveaway. They're going to be downloaded free, so I'll actually include the link just in the details or the show notes below, so you can check that out and download those 2 distress calls, and I'll keep you up to date on what's going on with the rest of the resource when I have more news. Now we're going to move on to the discussion topic for today's podcast, and I wanted to go over a list that I started building about 2.5 years ago. Actually, 2 lists, and these lists are the top 10 role-playing games that I want to run, and the top 5 role-playing games that I haven't found yet. Now, like I said, I started building these lists about 2 years ago, and I realized as I was basically collecting role-playing games or reading about them, it was too much information for me to keep in my head. And there's so many good games out there, and there are so many good resources that I really wanted to basically keep a way of sorting the best ones on top, at least the best ones that work for my interests, and that way I can kind of keep my eyes on the prize and keep my options open with running stuff that I found very, very interesting. So that's why I started creating these lists, and over time I've added to them. I've only been able to run one of the games in them, but I think it's kind of like a bucket list almost, except I very much plan on checking all of these off over time as the opportunity comes up. So the first list I'll go over are the top 10 RPGs that I want to run. These could be systems, modules or adventures, or settings, that type of thing. So number 10 on my list is Ironsworn and Ironsworn Delve Solo. This is actually a new addition to my list. It came on the list a few months ago. I think I finally had sat down and read Ironsworn, and I said, hey, this is pretty interesting. I ran one game, kind of like a one-shot, and I did really poorly. And so I ended up going online and watching someone play Ironsworn, and then I downloaded, I think, the official podcast by the creator, and there was a lot of good practical information as to how you can run Ironsworn a little bit more easier. And I used that basically, if you talk aloud to yourself, ask better questions, then you can work with the Oracle system in Ironsworn better. And so it ended up working for me. So I'm in the middle of a solo campaign right now. I'd say about halfway through, maybe like a quarter of the way through. And so that one will probably be checked off the list by next year sometime. And the reason I want to check it off the list is because Starforged, their Ironsworn basically in space, is coming out, and I'm really excited about that resource as well. So number 10, Ironsworn. Number 9 for me is Ambush, which is not an RPG. It's actually a war game in a campaign style setting. And this has been on my list for a long, long time. It's from the late 80s, I believe. And it's a solo war game. You know, I've only played a few war games in my life, but I've really, really enjoyed them. I really enjoy just how weighty and crunchy the rules are. And so I was really interested in trying this out. The problem is it's really hard to find copies. Copies are super pricey, and so I will get to it eventually. I kind of want the physical version. I'll treat myself one of these times, find an eBay copy, and just splurge and go after it. But that's number 9 for me. Number 8 is the Ghost of Lion Castle. That was the season focus for today, and like I said, I'm in the middle of a campaign there, but it's going to take a while. I've explored 2 rooms in the castle, and there are multiple levels in the castle, so that one might take a while. Number 7 for me is a Traveler campaign that's both gritty and lethal. So I actually had the chance to run a Traveler campaign a few years back. I was generating my own systems for it, and since then I have fallen more in love with the canon and the established universe for Traveler. And so I would very much love to run a gritty, lethal Sandbox Traveler campaign inside the established universe. And that's kind of what my solo campaign is doing right now, is I'm preparing for this eventual possible campaign as I'm building out and filling in the sandbox, so that eventually when I can run this game, I have the world figured out. I have every planet system where the characters might go. It's something to do there, and I have everything filled out. So that's number 7 for me. Number 6 is The Lost City, which is a Dungeons and Dragons module. And I think I covered that in the first episode of this podcast season. And this one is mostly for nostalgia. That was the very first adventure I learned when I started playing Dungeons and Dragons. And mostly I would love to bring my kids through it when they get, to the right age. And so that's mostly why it's on my list, kind of like a nostalgia, family history in gaming type thing that makes me excited. Number 5 would be Pendragon, specifically just a one-shot, and I really, really want to run a one-shot focused around a feast that really is non-combat oriented. So just focused around maybe a hunt during the day and then a feast at night. I think that would be super fun, especially for one of my gaming groups. I think they would have a lot of fun with that. And that one I'm hoping for later this year or next year. I think that is definitely a possibility. Number 4, keep on the Borderlands. That was, I think, last week's season focus for this particular season. It's, simply put, it's like a Hex style wilderness crawl or West Marches campaign, but it's the original. It's the old school, and I really want to run it in original 2E. So Dungeons and Dragons, I should clarify. So I'm really excited about that as well. And someday, I don't have any timeline on that one. It would take quite a bit to get a group, any of my groups, to try and run that advanced version of Dungeons and Dragons, the old school version. So we'll see. Number 3 on the top RPGs I want to playlist is Dungeon Crawl Classics. I want to do a proper long form campaign starting at level 0 characters, the funnel, all the way through ? As far as they can get. That system just speaks to me. I remember when I saw the book on the shelf like 20 times before I finally decided, hey, I'll look at this. And I think I opened up to one of the pages in back where it was describing the patrons, and it had a usable table about something about the patrons. And I was like, this system supports this type of table. Like, this isn't just a random supplement. This is like built into the core rules. And I was hooked, and I just started looking at all the random tables and realized there was a bunch of ingenuity, a lot of creativity put into that system, and I absolutely love it. The one problem I have with DCC is that spellcasting can kind of be a hassle because of the array of outcomes that can happen from any spell. It is challenging to run a spellcaster without the app. You just end up with a lot of paperwork per spell. Other than that, super excited about running Dungeon Crawl Classics, a campaign of some sort in that game. The other cool thing about that system is their modules are just so inventive. There's so many cool things happening in their modules that I just can't talk enough about how much I enjoy that system. So number 2 for me, for top RPGs I want to play, is the original Ravenloft module from Dungeons and Dragons. This is another story of me finding a module online and buying it, reading it, and just getting blown away by how strongly written this module was. It's actually going to be next episode's focus for old school D&D modules. It'll end the season for season 1 here for the podcasts. So I'll talk more about it there, but it's brilliant, I think, and I really want to run that for any of my groups. And the number 1 top RPG game that I want to play is the Great Pendragon campaign all the way through. Now, if you're not aware, Pendragon is a game basically that takes place during the King Arthur era of old Britain, and the character you run is going to be a knight in most cases. And there's a lot of cool things about this particular game and how the game is run. One of them is that you are specifically built into the rules is that you're going to be playing a character and then eventually be playing the character's offspring or a family member. And it's like a multi-generational style game where each session is basically 1 year and each session of play is 1 year in the game. And so, over 15 years, which is only 15 game sessions, that's quite a bit of in-game time that has passed. And so you'll be playing multiple characters if you do a proper campaign. The Great Pendragon campaign covers something like 100 years of history. I'm putting that in air quotes because it's, not really history, but it's historical in the fact that they follow a lot of the King Arthur stories from like the 480s maybe through the 590s. I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's you'll be playing multiple generations of your family. There's all sorts of intrigue and big wars and battles, and there's it's incredibly packed. It's a full game experience. And it seems so great. I am running a solo, imagine that, a solo campaign through the Great Pendragon campaign, trying to learn the system and learn the actual adventure of the Great Pendragon campaign. And I'm also listening to a really nice podcast the esoteric order of role players, maybe. And in that particular podcast, the game master's name is David Larkins, I think. But it's been really interesting. Basically, what I do is I play a year with my character, and then I go and listen to the corresponding year in the podcast. And it does two things for me. I like to see how my character handles things versus the characters in the game, but also David Larkins knows the system intimately. I think at this point he's writing in the system, or he works for, oh man, I can't even remember who wrote the game. Chaosium, maybe. Anyways, he's writing for, I believe he's writing for them, and so I'm kind of learning as to how he changes different things in the Great Pendragon campaign to make it a little more fun for a group. So that is my number one RPG that I want to play, and yeah, there's no way I can get my gaming group to sit down and do 100 sessions of anything right now, and so that one is going to be far, far in the future. Now, the other table I wanted to cover is the top 5 RPGs I haven't found yet, and I'm about to go through these, but before I start, I do want to give you the caveat that number one, the RPGs that I'm going to list here, there's definitely games and systems that work with what I'm going to describe, but I'm usually looking for something very specific in a niche, and that's why, there's a lot of systems out there that may not fit what I'm looking for, even though like on paper they do. The other thing I want to just say is that I don't know all of the systems out there, and please, 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 if you're hearing this and you think to yourself, oh, there's this really great system that I know of, James, that's me, he must not know of them, please share those with me. Put them in the comments below. Twitter, I'm at PaperDiceGames. My email is paperdicegames@gmail.com. Let me know so I can play these systems and try them out, and I don't have to keep on searching. So here are the top 5 RPGs I haven't found yet. The first one is a good zombie survival game. Now, clearly, there's a lot of good zombie survival games. What I'm looking for is something very, very specific. I want a game that focuses on a group of characters in a very small town with a very detailed map, and all it is them trying to survive the zombie apocalypse in this small town. And that's it. That the world is the small town, and they're just trying to survive the zombie apocalypse. What I don't want to get into is all sorts of external, big picture stuff. I don't necessarily want to get into, like biker gangs or like, I don't know, apocalypse gangs coming in and out of town or nothing like that. I just want to focus on the group versus the zombies, and really playing in just a detailed small town, and that's all they're going to interact with, and you don't have to worry about the world at large. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. If you know of something like that, please let me know. Number 4 for me for top RPGs I haven't found yet is a crunchy, detailed magical research game. And I know there's a lot of really crunchy magic games out there, and what I want to do in a game is, and I guess what I mean is I want to be able to play a wizard or something like that, and your core focus and the core gameplay revolves around researching and exploring magic in the world, and then when you learn things or figure things out or get materials, you test them or you research them or you do magical experiments, and the results of those experiments help you gain more magical abilities and help you learn more about the world. And so all of the other RPG elements that would happen in like a fantasy game would still be there, but the focus wouldn't be on killing monsters. It'd be on, grabbing this particular type of monster's blood or this like tooth of this particular monster. And the focus wouldn't be on getting treasure or getting power. It would be on getting knowledge, excuse me, so that you could go back and learn more about magic. So that is what I mean when I say a crunchy, detailed magical research game. So again, if you know of one, let me know, but I'm still searching. Number 3 is a space opera game, and this is one that probably does exist, and it's just my lack of experience. But really, I'm looking for a game where the game focuses around a crew on a ship, and that's their home base, and each episode they're going somewhere, and then they interact with one thing in any game episode. So it might be another ship, it might be a planet, it might be a civilization, it might be an asteroid, whatever. You can kind of picture like Star Trek, that type of thing happening in Star Trek, but I don't want, any of the setting. I don't want any of the extra outside stuff. I just want the focus to be on the ship, the crew, and the ability to run these like one-shot episodic type adventures. And I want the gameplay to just focus on that type kind of design cycle. I do know of some games that basically are made for that type of gameplay, but they there's like an outside setting and they focus on a whole lot more, and it kind of dilutes the type of gameplay experience that I'd be looking for. So if you know of a space opera game that's just tightly focused around the crew, the ship, and then these episodic one session adventures, that would be what I'm looking for. So yeah, let me know. Number 2 for me of RPGs I haven't found yet, this would be a game focused only on royal court politics, and I think specifically this would be fantasy setting, although I wouldn't mind something in anywhere from like medieval times in like real history, like a historical game, up through maybe the 1800s or something like that. And basically it ignores everything else and just focuses on court intrigue and court politics. I did download a game, and I should have looked it up because now I can't remember, but it's a Powered by the Apocalypse game. It's a Cloak and Dagger style game, and the game is built for the style of play, which is royal court politics. There's still like, you can play an assassin in the game, which I haven't read too much into it, but basically I am going to read through that system, and it might fit for this game that I'm looking for. But yeah, a game focused only on court politics, that type of thing, would be very, very interesting to be able to play. And the number one RPG that I haven't found yet that I want is a Harry Potter game. Now, I know there's a bunch of Harry Potter games out. This is one thing where I bet that I've read most of them because I've done a ton of research into Harry Potter games trying to find something precisely that I want. Now, what I want out of a Harry Potter game, a lot of them do a lot of great things. A lot of them are inventive. A lot of them just capture the setting of Harry Potter. But what I want to do in a Harry Potter game that would be perfect for me is I want to run around Hogwarts as a student. I want to have a very small inventory of spells, and I want to have to solve problems using those small inventory of spells. And that's it. I want the game to really focus on problem solving with these wonky spells, and that's about it. And then you kind of go through the first year, I guess the rest of it's irrelevant and you can do it however you want. But yeah, just a Harry Potter game focused on using wonky spells to solve kind of crazy wizarding problems or witching problems. That would be my ideal game. Now, like I said, there's a lot of Harry Potter games. A few of them I've gotten close to trying to do a practice adventure, but in each of them I come into some actual design problems with what I want and how it's written. So if you know of a different Harry Potter game that's a little bit closer to what I'm looking for, let me know. Again, comments below or at Paper Dice Games Twitter, paperdicegames@gmail.com for email. I'd love to hear about it. I've read a lot of Harry Potter games, so we'll see. Hopefully you can give me something that I have not yet found. Now that's going to bring us to our listener questions today. I have 2, and the first one is from Justin on YouTube. Justin, I want to apologize to you. I did not see your comment. It's been sitting there unanswered for quite a while, so I did answer it the other day. Justin from YouTube says, I loved your Dwarf Mine playthrough. Any more to come? Now, if you're not aware, on my YouTube channel, I have a Dwarf Mine playthrough basically showing how to play Dwarf Mine. I recorded it when Dwarf Mine was released last year. And Justin is asking, are there any more playthroughs to come? The answer is I have none planned at this point. I really enjoyed the process of doing that, and I plan on doing some sort of playthrough or video for future products that I release and projects that I release. Right now, though, I don't have anything planned. I think, having answered this question, Justin, I think it would be fun to do a playthrough of the Ghost of Lion Castle and just go through one session of an adventure for that. But we'll see. I have this fun balance I get to do. I have a very small amount of gaming and design time, so I get to split that time that I have between gaming and design. And then if I am, recording videos, then I get to split my gaming time in between that as well. And so maybe I'll do one, but nothing planned right now. But thanks for the question, Justin. Really appreciate it. And the second question that we have today is, how do you scratch the itch of wanting to run a campaign but being unable to do so, specifically for RPGs? And I chose this question because it kind of fits with the topic today for the podcast, which was the top 10 games I want to run. And it's a really good question. I don't have any really, really great answers for this, but I do have 2 strategies that I've used with some success for this. So obviously I have 10, actually more than 10, role-playing games that I want to run but have been unable to. And so here is how I've been able to run some of these games. The first strategy I have is to do a one-shot. And what this does is I have two gaming groups that I game with irregularly. Some of us have kids, everyone's busy, things are happening. So it's hard for us to find a regular time. But one-shots are a great way to get your feet wet with the system without having to commit to too much. And so I've done this successfully with a few different systems, and I continue to use this strategy. For example, the Pendragon system, I really want to run a game with the groups with this. I think they would enjoy it, and it would kind of give them some exposure to that. And someday in some far off future, I could run the Great Pendragon campaign with them. So that's what a one-shot does. It does two things. Number one, it gives you an opportunity to scratch that itch and run a game in that system, but it also gives your gaming group experience with the system, and if it's a fun and enjoyable experience, they might be more willing to come back and play a campaign within that system. The second solution or strategy that I have to this particular question is putting an ending to the campaign. And this is something, I got to pull this up, hold on. This is something that I did at the beginning of 2021 when I ran one of my top 10 role-playing games that I want to run. So previously, number 7 on my list was a contemporary urban supernatural fantasy similar to the show Supernatural or the Dresden Files, that type of thing. We ended up using Monster of the Week as the system, and we ran 6 sessions in basically what I called the first season of gameplay. And it was really fun. I sat down, well, first of all, I was telling my partner Anna about it, and she said she was interested in playing that game. And I said, oh, well, then let's do it. So then I sat down with the group and I explained what the game was like. I explained the possible timeline, and they all agreed. 6 sessions, that's only 6 weeks. And we started in January and we finished, I think, early March. I think we had to skip a week or two. And we had a session 0. We set everything up. Everyone gave input on the world. We did character creation. And then we had 6 episodes in that first season. And it worked out great. And I got to run a campaign on my list that I would not have been able to run otherwise. And I think there's something really, really strong to be said about putting an end date on the campaign, because open-ended campaigns, especially for people, who might have families or busy with work or don't have regular weekly schedules, it can be really intimidating to try and commit to like Friday nights for the next X, for who knows how long. But when it's only 6 weeks, it's a lot easier to say yes to something because there's a specific end date. And then, of course, if you have an end date and you run a campaign, make sure to hit your end date. I've also had campaigns where we say like 10 episodes or 10 sessions and that's it. And, on 15, 16, we're running out of steam, and it's because we went past the end date. So that would be my second strategy, is put an end date on the campaign and try and keep it under 10. Actually under 8 is better, because once you get to 8, you're looking at 2 months or more. So under 8 is going to work pretty well. And if you put an end date on it, people are going to be more willing to join and commit to that amount of time, just because it's not that much. And that's going to bring us to the end of episode 4. I want to thank everybody for listening to the Paper Dice Games podcast. You can get in touch with me about the podcast responses or other questions on Twitter at Paper Dice Games, on email paperdicegames@gmail.com, or just use the comments below or get a hold of me any other way that you can. Thank you, and I'll see you next week.